Today we shall talk about the Fall of Netheril, a story that is retold across Faerun in all regions and by all races. The most common teaching that this story brings up is human fallibility, and how defying the gods will lead to ruin, and most importantly the arrogance of the powerful. How I talk about this will rub some scholars wrongly. I hope to present a narrative that is not tainted by these moral tropes. The first thing we must talk about is the loss of the remaining Nether Scrolls. Karsus had arranged for a transfer of the remaining scrolls from Yolan's enclave over to Karsus' enclave. At this point in time, Elnar paved the way in magical research, while Zinlanal turned into a gaggle of old magi. The scrolls were transferred to Karsus with a massive protecting force of over 125 arcanists and warriors, and to a man, they were all wiped out in an ambush. No sign of the assailant was ever found, and after almost 2,900 years, all of Netheril's 100 scrolls had finally been stolen. This was a huge blow for the Netherese population. It strengthened the Low Netheril's rebellion and High Netheril's isolation. With the ongoing frustration of Low Netheril, it is no wonder that Olostin came to be. He was a personification of the hatred that had been forming since the second theft of Nether Scrolls. Olostin, who was later to be known as Baron of Death, was a young man that was frustrated with all the focus on magic. He travelled to the edges of Netheril and stumbled across the Faerun. Now, the Faerun will need an entire chapter dedicated to it, but in a short summary, Faerun are magical creatures created by a different magical nation. They were, unbeknownst to the Netherese, released during a magical geoengineering project. The Faerun were not aware of the Netherese or their magical nature when they first met Olostin, but they soon learned all they needed to know before launching their attack. In return for betraying his own race, the Faerun granted Olostin great power. Olostin went on to lead a horrific campaign against Netheril, slaughtering humans like Yolam once killed the orcs. Olostin met his death by an unknown arcanist who destroyed his hold and everything around it. The Faerun now enter the stage and start an all-out guerrilla war on Netheril. They manage to pull down 2 enclaves before the Netherese get a countermeasure. Netherese now start flying their enclaves further away from their homeland, both to avoid the life-draining spells that are turning Netheril farms into deserts, but also to prevent Faerun attacks. At this point, both High and Low Netheril are in a panic. In 3520, Yolan left Netheril. The life-draining spells had started affecting his anti-aging spells, and he didn't wish to revert to Lichdom, a fate that several arcanists had already had to do. Yolam left with little fanfare and gave control to his enclave to his Council of 12. We need to understand the impact this had on Netheril. For over 3,000 years, Yolam had been on Netheril's side. He had trained well over 1,000 arcanists in the art. He was the father of Netheril, the undying leader that had been with them forever. Him leaving Netheril was a sign of the end times. Enclaves falling, pastures turning to desert, mass migration, Netheril was burning, and as a nation, they all turned to one man to put out the fire, Karsus. Karsus had long been working on a countermeasure to the Faerun, that had become an obsession to him at some point. Grand discoveries came out of this obsession. Working with Telmont Tontool, they discovered the Shadow Weave. Karsus was also the first and only person to ever learn how to use heavy magic, a physical liquid that empowered magic tenfold. However, all these discoveries were for naught. The Faerun continued to progress, and the land was soon to be devoured by the Faerun. In a last-ditch effort, Karsus used all his skill and power to craft a spell that would stand the test of time as the most powerful magical action to ever be performed. It might be that Karsus not only pierced the veil and saw the magic that the gods used, but he also managed to look past this into the area that only Ao, the Overgod, could use. This was unsafe. Karsus did not have the guidance of the Nether Scrolls, so he had to be all based on his own understanding of magic. The spell he crafted would end up taking a full 6 hours to cast, and require some of the most complex ritual components in existence, along with a massive amount of heavy magic and the use of both sides of the weave. We assume that both myth-holders on Eleanor were under tremendous strain to help support this casting. Here I diverge from other realm sages in interpreting why Karsus cast the spell. Almost to a person, they all claim he was power-hungry, or mad, or otherwise mentally unstable, but I think it's more likely he was desperate. Karsus was handed the Empire from Yolam, who clearly thought it lost, the people all begging him for assistance against the Faerun, and the Faerun all consuming Netheril. Karsus could have left, could have flown Eleanor into fresh lands, but this is not the Karsus I see. He took his responsibility seriously, and this is the burn that ended up killing him. The morning of the 20th of Currentol, in the year of the Sundering Web, 3520, Karsus finished casting his final spell, Avatar. A spell that would allow him to take temporary embodiment of the power of a chosen god. Some claim that Karsus chose Mistral because he saw her the most powerful, but I think it's more likely that he understood that the Faerun were magical creatures, and that with Mistral's power he could cut them off from the weave and dispel the draining spells they had put in place. Whatever the reason, the spell worked. For a very short time, Karsus did take over the power of Mistral. But also, in what I think was the mistake that Karsus did not plan for, was the responsibility for keeping the weave running. The spell ended instantly, and his mortal body was slain. All other magic on Toril ended, causing every enclave to plummet toward the ground. Some enclaves survived the fall, some of them escaped to other planes, but none flew in Faerun. Karsus' body died, but his spirit was not released. He was transformed, forever caged on the material plane, so his punishment could be ongoing. Today we can find his prison in Karsus, north in the High Forest. The question I am left with is this. Did Karsus know that he would not survive the spell? He knew what the spell did. He knew it was limited. He was aware that under no circumstance did this sort of power come free. I think his avatar spell was a sacrifice, that he did for all of Netheril. He expected to be punished by the gods once the spell was over, but he hoped that he could prevent Netheril's impending doom before the punishment started. But this might just be me, wanting to see Karsus redeemed. And that in turn is how the Netherese ended. There is a story to be told about the Shadow War, and also about what happened to the survivors in Netheril. I also want to go back and talk a bit about some individual items, some people, and events in Netheril. All of those are stories for another time.